I think we're starting to see why Walz was not a good pick for Harris.
When you get rid of competent professionals, you tend to bring in incompetent amateurs. And that seems to have played out.
He shouldn't have had the job. Let's be clear. Being on Fox News and running a nonprofit was not enough to qualify.
This feels like Donny's Angels, full bungle instead of full throttle. Welcome to Political Rehab, smart politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
Today, a Republican canary explodes in the coal mine. The Tim Walz corruption probe, something or nothing. Trump accounts get an infusion of right-wing billionaire money. Bart Simpson running the Department of War. And pardon roulette. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump. That's right. It's time for the Trump dump, our weekly segment where we get it all out of our system up front so we can have a great show. Because it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, there's something Donald Trump did this week that pissed you off.
Matt? I've got a great one this week. It reminds me a little bit if you attended a basketball game when the ref calls traveling on one of your opponents and the whole crowd chants, "You can't do that." And that's exactly the reaction that I had when Donald Trump tried via Truth, Tweet, X, something, to cancel all of President Biden's pardons and other executive orders because he decided they weren't signed the right way. Any and all documents, proclamations, executive orders, memorandums, or contracts signed by order of the now infamous and unauthorized auto pen, blah, 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 has been fully, completely terminated. There's no legal effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I would like you, Donny, to pay attention to this matter. Everything you just said is complete horse shit. First of all, Article 2 of the Constitution makes no mention of a signature requirement for a pardon. Article 1 does mention the president signing a bill into law, but the Office of Legal Counsel, which provides the president and the entire executive branch with constitutional advice, has specifically stated that the president need not personally perform the physical act of affixing the signature to a bill he approves and decides to sign for the bill to become law. In fact, the president can even have someone else sign on his behalf, according to their historical analysis. This is courtesy of Kim Whaley, a constitutional law scholar and multi-time guest on my show. But the piece that I really want to dump on Trump about is his lack of appreciation for irony, because he canceled executive orders via an executive order issued by tweet because they were not issued in the proper form. Once again, Donald Trump, master of irony and subtlety. And that is my Trump dump.
Oh, that is fantastic. I loved every piece of that. Mine comes from the cabinet meeting. When Pete Hegseth was pressed by reporters about this second narco-terrorist strike, this is what he had to say.
This is called the fog of war. This is what you in the press don't understand. You sit in your air-conditioned offices or up on Capitol Hill and you nitpick.
But to me, it sounded a lot like this.
I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it.
You can't just Nathan Jessup your way out of accountability. And if it's the fog of war, where's the declaration of war? Look, I'm not shedding tears over killing narco terrorists, and if blowing up these boats saved hundreds of thousands of lives, as Trump claims, that's great. But here's the problem. The ends don't justify the means. The results are not all that matter. In America, how we do things is just as important as what we do. That's why we have checks and balances. That's why we have oversight. That's why reporters ask questions. And right now we have no answers. That's because this administration hasn't explained a thing. No intelligence briefings, no address to the American people, nothing. Just we killed a bunch of bad guys. Now, I know some of my Republican friends like to cheer for Trump because they like the results. They like the theatrics because blowing up things sound decisive. But here's why this is my Trump dump of the week. As a Republican, I believe in the rule of law. I believe in the Constitution. If you abandon it in the name of results, you're not protecting America. You're dismantling the very structure that makes it possible.
You want me on that Instagram post. You need me on that Instagram post. You can't handle the truth. Sublime Trump dump. And with that, because we're going to have a lot more Hegseth coming up for you, let's get to this week's political rundown. First up, how bad was the Tennessee special election for the grand old party? Gosh, I hate that GOP. I hate that. Let's let go of that, people. Neither grand nor old, definitely old, kind of a party. It was not the greatest week if you're a Republican. Looking at the special election for Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, where the Republican Matt Van Epps did win over the interestingly named Afton Bain, picturing a Batman villain with a mask on their face, by an 8.9 percentage point margin. Now, this is a deep red district. Donald Trump won it by 22 points barely over a year ago. So this is not great. He just underperformed Trump by roughly 13 points. My question to you, Matt, as a Republican political consultant, campaign strategist, how many bricks are your party collectively shitting?
It's kind of rough right now. Look, special elections rarely predict what's happening in the next cycle. But this Democrat, let's not forget who this candidate was. Democrat was a disaster. She's a far left activist who hated country music in Tennessee and wanted to defund the police. And the fact that it was this close, that it was 8 or 9 points, should be that warning sign. We need to be out there really looking at what's happening, because just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, just like what happened in Virginia, New Jersey, Tennessee is another warning sign, and Republicans need to start paying attention or it will be ugly coming this year.
Bain, last seen telling an FBI agent, "It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan." She is a 36-year-old former community organizer who, in addition to saying, "I don't like country music in Tennessee,"
you lose that way.
Why not just say, "Screw you, Dolly Parton"? She said, "I'm a very radical person." She advocated for dissolving the Nashville Police Department, wished a good morning, especially to the 54% of Americans that believe burning down a police station is justified. Oh, gosh. There's good news, bad news, good news in all this for Democrats. You vastly overperformed in a special election. This is definitely a bellwether. And let's just say you have room to grow. If you can somehow get over the idea of, nominating the person who won a 4-way primary with 28% of the vote, less than 1,000 votes over her nearest competitor, who is this kind of outside the mainstream, maybe we can do better as a party. If you can get over that hurdle, you might be able to close the rest of the gap. It's only 9 points. I'd be very scared if I were in your party.
Trump accounts. Now, I have hated these things. They were included in the One Big Beautiful Bill, and I wrote about this all the time in my column in McClatchy. And what I hate about it is that the provision gives $1,000 to every child born for the next 3 years. That is taxpayer money that is going to children. That is redistribution of wealth. In my book, that is socialism. Republicans shouldn't be for this at all. It is an unmitigated disaster. It might be the largest expansion of government that we have seen since, I don't know, the Great Society. Is this the new Social Security? What is happening here? Matt, am I missing something?
Oh, what you're missing is that Michael and Susan Dell, and oh gosh, do I feel so bad that I just bought an upgrade to my Dell with another Dell. Please, I'm embarrassed. They just pledged $6.25 billion to help deposit $250 into each of 25 million Trump accounts. Look, there are so many problems. To begin with, this Dell move is of questionable legality. You really don't want private sector billionaires contributing to pay for government programs. You don't want them, for example, paying for the White House ballroom expansion, because it's essentially an emolument. It's essentially currying favor. It's essentially a political donation in another form. It's corrupt. It's corrupt as hell. But beyond that, the whole setup here, look, this is a bipartisan idea, the idea of having baby bonds, helping families to build wealth, intergenerational wealth. We have a real wealth problem in this country. People can't, it's not just affordability, it's that people can't build up a reserve of wealth and savings to afford the things that they need, from education, housing, the kinds of things that allow them to accrue more wealth. So I like the idea in general. He's bollocksed this one up so badly. There are so many better bipartisan proposals from Republicans, this is essentially a marketing exercise branded around Trump's name. It's not for the kids. And the biggest benefits go to the families who can afford the most. It's a terribly designed idea. And it sounds like it's failing on your account too.
Look, I love what the Dells did. Like, that is the way this thing should work. But the problem I have is, again, we're taking our money and doing it. Now, how are we accounting for this? Is this a lockbox? Somebody give me Al Gore on the phone. Are we doing more lockboxes as accounts here? We can't even pay for Social Security right now. It is a mess. It shouldn't have been done. It's a great election year gimmick. That's about all this is going to be.
Disagree. It's a bad election year gimmick. I'm not sure we want billionaires funding government programs. It's just down that way lies trouble. Speaking of trouble, we have a Minnesota mess on our hands. This isn't great. It's been happening on Tim Walz's watch. Hundreds of millions of dollars, multiple large fraud scandals in public assistance programs. Federal prosecutors describe it as the largest pandemic fraud in the United States. And it happens to center on defendants who are of Somali descent, which is, of course, drawn in the ire of the great orange one, because, of course, look, there's nothing he likes more than a potential pet eating story, and he's got one on his hands here. What do you make of all this?
I think we're starting to see why Walz was not a good pick for Harris. Look, the House investigation is probably warranted. There's probably clearly fraud. To Walz's credit, he wants it to be looked into. I want Congress looking into things. Truth is, he probably didn't do anything wrong. My issue is sort of this. At the cabinet meeting, we saw Trump call Somalis garbage right as this investigation is happening. Then Trump sends in ICE. Look, this thing looks way too political, and it's a typical Trump problem where they step over themselves every single time, trying to get in the headlines, trying to be the tough guys. And instead, now they're tainting it. They're overshadowing what's there. Maybe there is fraud. We need to get to the bottom of it. But the fact that now we've gotten all these other things happening, I think just diminishes the whole thing and just creates more problems for us than should.
As a Democrat, I hate to be put in the position. Look, we've seen, even within Minnesota politics, cases, Franken, where there is a Republican right-wing put-up job involved in some misbehavior, some mistakes. And I regretted the dog pile that occurred in that case. I think the Democrats got kind of played. In this case, there seems to be, it's all still alleged, but there seems to be a substantial amount of fraud. And I'm not going to go about trying to defend the indefensible. What I will do is, like you, push back on he who shall not be named. We can't let this go down the xenophobia, racism trail. There's no need for that. It's horrifying. It's terrible. And it's just, this is how you can get from a place where you and I agree, like something illegal happened. It's really bad. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's uncover it. If Democrats made mistakes, then Democrats made mistakes, but let's not let it go to the ugly Trump place in American political life. We just don't.
The boat strike blame game. First, it was Pete Hegseth. I was there. I was watching on TV. Then I wasn't there, but the Admiral, he did it. He did it. He's so good. I support him, but I just want to be clear. I wasn't there. Now it's just this ever evolving story. It really is the Bart Simpson. I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it. You can't prove anything that we have for our Secretary of War. And it is showing what a complete mess it is going on there. Just the other day, they kicked out all the press, and now we had Matt Gaetz and Laura Loomer asking questions of the Pentagon. That's how much of a joke this has happened. Can it get worse? Are there other disasters that I'm missing? Because right now, I'm kind of embarrassed looking at this.
They should be embarrassed because South Park dedicated an entire episode this past week to making fun of Pete Hegseth. They even invented a song. The refrain was, Pete Hegseth is a fucking douche. Is there anyone in America who disagrees with that sentiment? He is a total embarrassment. He never, ever should have been confirmed. You personally know Republican senators. I'll bet deep inside they're dying of shame, but of course they have to double down on this because you can't ever back up in Donald Trump's Republican Party. My question to you is Pete Hegseth, and by the way, let's not fall into the trap of calling him Secretary of War. This is a made-up confabulation until Congress, which has the authority to do this, changes it. Secretary of Defense, sorry. Is he going to have a job in 3 months? What's your bet?
No, he absolutely is not. He is going, first of all, he shouldn't have had the job. Let's be clear. Being on Fox News and running a nonprofit was not enough to qualify to run one of the largest agencies. I think its budget is larger than something like 20 states. Like, it is insane. He never should have been put in charge. I think you see the president even starting to distance a little bit from this boat strike and who's to blame. And the fact that Republicans are starting to investigate this, I think they've had enough. What I'm starting to see over and over again, they're tired of these antics. They're tired of his little patent stand in front of the big flag. Don't look behind me. Stand in front of the big flag and just sort of get up there and start to give his speeches. The things that he's doing in the military just look absolutely ridiculous. So no, I don't think he has a job in it.
Oh gosh, you're reminding me of the scene in Hot Shots Part 2 where Lloyd Bridges stands up with those military style pants that are pleated out at the sides. And he says to the assembled soldiers, I know you're all wondering, what the hell's wrong with my pants? Pete Hegseth is a clown. And he's an embarrassment to America. He's an embarrassment to your party. I would go under 3 months. They have to wait for optics purposes, but you're going to find an excuse to move him on. I'm looking for your help to try and understand this. I'm wondering if Donald Trump is choosing his pardons by having a chicken peck at photos of random criminals, because he's not just pardoned Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar, who were indicted in 2024 on bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy charges, the Trump trifecta. He loves all of those things. And to be clear, was not convicted, but was indicted. On top of that, within the last week, he has pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, an ex-president of Honduras, who was extradited to the United States in 2022 and was sentenced to 45 years in prison for taking bribes from drug traffickers to move 400 tons of cocaine through Honduras into the United States. That's more than you can get on 20 fishing boats, my friends.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Finally, although this is far from final, but just in recent days, Trump pardoned David Gentile, a founder of GPB Capital. He was convicted of participating in a $1.6 billion fraud scheme that misled thousands of investors who lost their life savings. What is the thread that connects all of this insanity, Matt Wiley?
I think it's a wheel. I think you spin the wheel and you pull out a name. You're like, sure. Here's the thing is we are blowing up narco terrorists and we have this war on drugs, but we're letting out people who have been convicted. We want to go after fraud, but yet if you're a public official, let's also not forget George Santos he pardoned.
George Santos didn't import 400 tons of cocaine.
That we know about. That is correct.
He probably used 400 tons of cocaine.
He probably actually claimed to be the guy that did it because he did like identity fraud. So let's not forget that. So it feels like what he likes to do is just, if you're a corrupt politician, then we're probably going to pardon you. There is no rhyme or reason. There is no principled piece. It just feels like the whim. It's ridiculous right now.
I don't have an explanation, but with Trump, 99% of the time, his behavior can be explained by retribution, financial incentive for himself, or some kiss-assery that appealed to like his soul-sucking need for flattery. I can see the potential for some of that in the final of the three pardons. With Hernandez and Cuellar,
they make zero sense and there's no political advantage for him to do it. So it was a favor to a friend somewhere and the advantage we'll just never know.
I hereby predict that this will come back and we will find out what those incentives are. All right, that wraps up our political rundown. Let's get to a brand new segment, hot off the presses.
Extra, read all about it.
You write for McClatchy. And
correct.
And you are syndicated and you appear in newspapers around the country. I write most frequently for Newsweek, and I have a new piece coming out, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity to check in on the stuff we're writing and just bounce it off each other and see what the other one thinks. So I have a new article coming out today. It's titled, Trump Built His Own Trap. Now he's caught in it. But I think the larger subtext for it that's begun to occur to me, and I wish I'd thought of it earlier, because there's been some new data points that have emerged since I wrote it, is this feels like Donny's Angels, full bungle instead of full throttle. Get it?
Yeah, that was good. That was good. That was a good one.
The point that I'm making, I'm going to try to run this down for you, and I'd love to get your reaction to it, is that right after the election, Donald Trump was getting sucked into one mirage and one trap. The mirage was how much power he was going to wield. And I think we've seen it play out in the last year. He's only been able to pass one substantive piece of legislation, and he has a Congress that is very hard to channel and maneuver and control. Like they're cats on ketamine. The trap was this catch-22 that he set up for himself. He was determined to purge what he described as the deep state, which means the professionals that work throughout the federal executive branch agencies to actually implement the laws and policies enacted by Congress. The thing is, these are people who are competent professionals. And as we've said on this show before, when you get rid of competent professionals, you tend to bring in incompetent amateurs. And that seems to have played out. I am spraining a shoulder. We should start a segment called Sprain a Shoulder where we congratulate ourselves for our own predictions. So I'm spraining a shoulder, patting myself on the back here. But we have seen this play out spectacularly with not the A team, not the B team, somewhere below the F team of personnel who have come in and bungled things spectacularly. We talked last week about Lindsay Halligan screwing up the Comey and James prosecutions. Since that time, Alina Habba has been disqualified from her appointed position. So the prosecutions that fall under her are now in limbo, in jeopardy, or completely defunct. Pam Bondi's Department of Justice completely undermined Trump's big Texas gerrymander by demanding it in a letter that was so legally idiotic that a Trump-appointed judge cited it as the court proof in his decision to overturn it. And this was, as I write in the article, the equivalent of bank robbers putting both their heist plan and their confession on a sheet of paper and mailing it to the cops. He bungled his plan to do away with the National Environmental Policy Act, or at least his minions in the administration, his MAGA henchmen, screwed that up. His maneuver to shift education department functions to the Labor Department, all of his MAGA people who he put into key positions there screwed that up. His anti-DEI executive order was so sloppily drafted that it's fallen into a judicial sinkhole. And here's the real chef's kiss of all of it. We've heard about all of the firings and rehirings that Trump has had to do over the years. The Brookings Institution, over the months, the Brookings Institution actually tracked 26,511 of these, where they fired people and then they realized, oh my gosh, that's a horrible idea. Why did we do that? They rehired them. In some cases, they refired them and rehired them. It has become an absolute comical morass of dysfunction and incompetence. And that's what I'm laying out is basically my case that I got a couple of things right in my previous Newsweek articles from a year ago, and now I'm taking a victory lap. What do you make of it?
Fantastic. And that's what I like about your articles. They're thoughtful. There's a nice thread that comes through them. I think for Republicans, one of the things I constantly hear and see is exactly what you're saying. These are not the best and the brightest. There are better choices for Attorney General. And let's not forget, Pam Bondi was the second choice for Attorney General. Matt Gaetz was the first choice for Attorney General. We had better choices along the way, competent people that could have done the job. And I think what drives a lot of people on my side of the aisle absolutely insane is these are all self-inflicted wounds. As a result of this, creating just constant chaos, to your point, there's one big, beautiful bill was a disaster. It's everything against what, as Republicans, we've always been against. But it was the only thing you could get through because everything else was just such a mess. And so I think your point is spot on. And I think everyone, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, like you want to see government work. It's one thing to disagree with the policy and the direction. You and I could debate, should we shut down the Department of Education, for example? But you don't want to see the systematic failure of justice along the way because you put the wrong people in there who are just doing things inappropriately, in some cases illegally, and the whole country has a problem because of it.
I think what bothers both of us as professionals who care equally, even though we come at it from different perspectives about the country and about the government. Just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you hate the government. We're a democracy. The government is us. The government represents us. You just want a good government. You want probably a little bit less government than I do, but we both want a good functioning government. So we could take any one of the bungles that I outlined. Let's just take the firings and rehirings. That was obviously shambolic. We talked last week about the end of Doge. But if we sat down, we talked about the fact that you and I could probably sit in a room and come up with a list of cuts. If the objective here is, all right, let's find some waste. Let's trim just a little bit of fat and let's agree on it. Let me give you a list here. We spend $1.7 trillion on the F-35, which has been plagued by cost overruns and delays. Now, look, I know that politically, the Republicans love to call the Democrats soft and weak, and so we can't ever be in the position of cutting defense, but maybe we can agree that subsidizing government contractors who are already making obscene profits, maybe we could do a little bit less of that. How about crop insurance subsidies? I know we all want to pander to the farmers of Iowa because it's our early caucus state, but the federal government subsidizes about 60% of crop insurance premiums. Maybe we could get rid of some of those subsidies that go to wealthy farmers and agribusinesses. There are Medicare Advantage overpayments. There are Veterans Administration construction projects that have been subject to massive cost overruns. The point is, if we wanted to do the Doge function, we could do it like that scene in the movie Dave. We could just sit down, look.
With a red pen.
With a red pen. This is actually, I'll give you another movie reference. This is more like the movie The Untouchables, where the Sean Connery character says, everyone knows where it is.
Right.
You want to rate? You want to do a liquor rate? I'll take you right there. The staffers on the Hill, I promise you, they know where the waste is. We could do this in an hour if we were serious and if people didn't want to do an obscene political exercise about it. But the people that Trump has put in place are so incompetent and have just paid the coin of the realm in terms of kissing up to Trump and being financially beholden to him. And he's not serious about any of this. And that is really the tragedy of all of this. Is it's not just how pathological he is about all of this. It's that he's screwing up our government, our American government.
And that's exactly right. We could find ways to make government more efficient, more effective. And as a Republican, I want to see a smaller, less intrusive government. And I do think there are tons of things we could cut. But when you don't put the right people in there, you end up with fanatics that just want to suck up to the boss, who want to score points.
All right, that wraps up our hot off the presses. If people want to see the entire article and send donations for my shoulder injury, you will find it on the Worth Knowing Substack. With that, let's go to our favorite segment of the week. We're going to tackle the thing that is most pervasive and most obnoxious about modern American life.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit. A bullshit?
Recently, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has had to address a swirl of questions around President Donald Trump's health. Right before Thanksgiving, the New York Times put out a story suggesting that Trump keeps a light schedule and is showing signs of serious cognitive decline. That prompted a fiery response from Leavitt.
That is unequivocally false. Are you kidding me?
And in the very same press conference, she addressed the results of a recent MRI study performed on the president.
This is a summary from the president's physician, and we will release it.
But there's not one, but two kinds of bullshit going on here. The first is subtle. We could call it stealth bullshit. It involves this report from the MRI.
No evidence of arterial narrowing impairing blood flow or abnormalities in the heart or major vessels. The heart chambers are normal in size, the vessel walls appear smooth and healthy, and there are no signs of inflammation or clotting. His abdominal imaging is also perfectly normal. All major organs appear very healthy and well perfused.
Did you catch it? On the face of it, this doesn't seem that bad. There have been questions about why the president was rushed in for an MRI scan.
What part of your body was the MRI looking at?
But notice that this detailed readout is occurring in the same press briefing addressing what's really at issue here, which is whether the president is showing signs of cognitive decline and alertness problems. According to the FBI's law enforcement bulletin in a training article on how to spot lying, it's a common technique to embed a lie within a bunch of details on something that seems related but isn't actually relevant. So it's great that the president's coronary arteries and stomach are in good shape, but that's not the question being asked. And by the way, even Trump knows this. He clarifies that the MRI has nothing to do with his cognitive health.
What part of the body? It wasn't the brain.
So what about the core issue here? This is where Leavitt and the entire Trump administration, and in fact the whole MAGA movement, have been overtaken by a different kind of bullshit. Gaslighting bullshit. Denying things that are obviously true and full of evidence to accuse people of being crazy.
You people are crazy. I'm sharper than I was 25 years ago.
Soon after that statement, the president appeared to be struggling to stay awake. His eyelids got heavy.
And of course, this isn't the first time this has happened.
He has appeared to doze during an Oval Office event on obesity, during a meeting with a foreign leader, and even during his own criminal trial proceedings.
There's a larger and very clear track record that Trump gets confused, forgets things, trips over his words, and just kind of generally melts down.
Windmills are driving the whales crazy. I know about magnets is this. Give me a glass of water. Let me drop it on the magnets. That's the end of the magnet. The kidney has a very special place in the heart. This is a tough hurricane. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. When you ran out the healthy arms, you ran out of really healthy. They had great arms, but they ran out. Did you just see Maduro, Venezuela?
Look, I think we could all accept the White House putting some spin on all of this or trying to dress it up. That's their job. But that's not what they're doing. They're gaslighting, which they're doing because the entire MAGA movement is incredibly sensitive about Trump's health and physical vitality. For example, the man has a history of lying about the fact that he's obese, lying about it in a really obvious way.
He self-reported his height and weight, 6'3", 215 pounds, and no one's buying it.
I'm going to go ahead and call, no, that is not the case.
If he weighs 215, I weigh 102.
If it is true, he'd have the same physique as NFL quarterback Lamar Jackson.
He freaks out at any intrusion of objective reality.
He is whatever he says he is.
Excuse me. It's 170.
And it's induced this odd virility panic in the MAGA movement that causes them to obsessively depict Trump as a muscle-bound beefcake, Rambo, or riding a lion. Actually, I like that last one. Pretty positive the lion is taken from the Narnia movies, and as true nerds know, Aslan is an allegorical symbol for Jesus, meaning that some MAGA tool just depicted Trump riding atop Jesus to make America great again. No notes. Sometimes you really need to step back and look at all the dots to have a picture emerge, like one of those magic eye diagrams that everybody hates. In this case, when you put together the White House's stealth deflections and the overall MAGA movement's unhinged and desperate fantasy about Trump's physicality, the overall pattern that emerges is exactly what you see in authoritarian dictatorships, where everyone is so deadly afraid of how sensitive the dear leader is that they make up stories about his exploits.
We're told the founder and president Kim Il-sung test-fired the first locally produced submachine gun 50 meters, more than 160 feet, hitting those two targets with a bullseye every time.
Comrade Kim Jong-un shot 3 bullets and 3 of them got bullseye.
They all got bullseye. And how old was he at the time?
He was 7-year-old.
The 7-year-old got 3 bullseyes?
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Look, it's not realistic to expect any White House to admit that the president is old, sleepy, or fat. But we don't have to let them get away with stealthily conflating things that really aren't related, or outright gaslighting us by denying evidence that's in front of our eyes, or obnoxiously attacking anyone who dares question their 2 + 2 = 5 make-believe. At the very least, we can identify it all as a tired, confused, and flabby piece of bullshit.
You know what I didn't even realize until we watched that through is that he fell asleep during a White House meeting on obesity.
Yes. And I just want to go on the record. I too aced my MRI. So, it can be done. I got straight A's. That's right.
Congratulations. I too can identify pictures of giraffes, so I'm feeling very proud of myself. All right, on that upbeat note, it's time to close out our show with our weekly dose of hope.
I was going to do the drunk raccoon that was found passed out in the liquor store in Virginia. I don't know. Sorry. He felt like our spirit animal, kind of the official political rehab mascot is kind of what I thought. But then two stories dropped that made me scrap the idea entirely because they point to something I think bigger and frankly more hopeful for Republicans, especially who feel politically homeless. First is Hegseth on the hot seat. The report found the use of signal risked the safety of U.S. troops. And I think we all knew that, but the fact that it was investigated, I thought was a good sign. Key lawmakers have questioned their confidence in Hegseth. GOP-led committees have embarked on aggressive oversight so far. That is a far cry from the confirmation hearings where they were asking how many push-ups he could do. Now, the second story that I saw was Republican anger erupts as Johnson as party threats over the future. Rep. Elise Stefanik of New York called Speaker Johnson a habitual liar. And 1 year out from the midterms, the Republicans' vanishing small majorities at stake, Johnson's grasp at the gavel appears to weaken. Some are saying, I don't even know if he would win if he was able to take a vote now recently. Now, why I say all this is I think Republicans are tired of being just a puppet for Trump. These two stories, Hegseth losing control of the Pentagon and Johnson losing control of the caucus, aren't just more chaos. They're signals, early tremors, signs that Republicans in Congress might be turning the corner, taking their job seriously. And for Republicans who still believe in confidence, accountability, and actual conservatism, that's the first real dose of hope I've seen in a long time.
I love it. And I'm going to double down with my own dose of hope, which comes from a boring tax report. Yes, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, which is what I read when I don't have any Versit available, issued a report showing that 15 states now provide or will provide child tax credits, many fully refundable for 2026. Now, before I lose all the Republicans in the audience, I want to let you know that many of these states are actually fully Republican governed or in some way Republican led. States like Georgia, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Indiana, and West Virginia, which has a Republican supermajority. Now, you may recall that there was an expansion of the child tax credit under the American Rescue Plan under President Joe Biden and a Democratic-led Congress that was highly effective. It reduced the number of children in poverty by more than a third, but then it lapsed. But now, quietly and importantly, these Republican-led states are experimenting with bringing back on the state level these kinds of child tax credits, which shows that this is an issue that's breaking through the partisan noise as the salience of affordability has risen on the national stage. Now, look, this isn't perfect by any means. It's not everything Democrats want. For one thing, many, if not most, of these Republican-led states that are issuing child tax credits are not doing refundable credits. I know this is down in the weeds, but it's a very important point. It means that the poorest people who have little or no tax liability aren't eligible and aren't getting the help. But that's a difference of degree, not of kind. It shows that even if this isn't giving everything that Democrats want, there's common ground for a bottom-up solution, and it opens the door for some further experiments. Maybe there's a way to do refundable credits for a limited number of years, or experiments like the earned income tax credit at the federal level that help to incentivize work. The point is, MAGA people are talking about raising birth rates and promoting families, which, by the way, probably a good thing. Democrats are talking about making life more affordable and helping people who are just trying to make it in America. This is a sign that we can do a little bit of both, and we can lead from the state level even when the federal level is broken, and that is my dose of hope.
Fantastic. I love it when we lead from the state level. Like that's the way government should be. I love that dose of hope.
All right, on that very hopeful note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next week.